I have no
Hi,
idea.
I'm Bonnie Hong,
And I'm Ben Hong.
and this is Norwich Confidential.
And we have no idea what we're going to talk about tonight because our guest canceled.
Our guest canceled it actually late last
Right.
night, so it
But
was too late to get
let
another.
me start out because I think it's very exciting that the election is coming, and so we have this great primary, and I think Donald Trump is going to be the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party.
He almost made it with the number of votes from Kentucky. Was it Kentucky or
Well, Sanders almost made it. I think it's a virtual tie, the Kentucky vote.
1,800
As far as
votes?
the Democratic Party is concerned.
In Kentucky, it was by 1,800 votes?
Right. So, and Oregon, of course, belonged to Sanders. So, as far as the Republicans are concerned, it's going to be a choice between Sanders and
Trump?
and Hillary. No, Trump is Republican, Bunny.
Oh, automatically, right. You mean on the Democratic
On the
side?
Democratic side, remember, in the Democratic side, there's Sanders and Hillary Clinton.
Right.
So, here's what I think is the best scenario that's going to happen.
Okay.
Assuming that Trump is going to be the Republican nominee, and assuming that after a convention, Hillary Clinton will become the nominee for the Democratic Party. Of course, Donald Trump will pick his vice president.
Right.
And I think Hillary Clinton will pick her vice president.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? That vice president is going to become the president. And it is a very simple thing. Hillary Clinton will beat Donald Trump. After Hillary Clinton,
how can Hillary beat
after
Donald
Hillary
Trump?
Clinton is elected, she will then be incarcerated for criminal offense. So guess who's going to become the president?
Whoever is the vice president.
That's right. So
All right, I think that
we are going to vote not for Hillary Clinton or for Donald Trump, but we're going to vote for whoever chooses the best candidate for vice president, because it's not going to be too long before they will become the president of the United States. But anyways, that's just
I think you've
my
made
opinion.
two assumptions that I don't think are accurate.
All right.
One, the first assumption is that Hillary Clinton will absolutely win the Democratic nomination.
Well, there's a probability.
It's yes, there is definitely a very strong probability, but it is
Right.
not a certainty, at least not yet.
Yes.
I think that the bigger assumption that you made that I think is not correct is that Donald Trump will beat her in the general election.
Well, let's go back to the Democratic Party.
Okay.
Because that is the biggest thing going on today.
Yeah.
I was I was waiting for my eye examination in Massachusetts, ear and nose.
Thank you very much for getting back here for tonight's show.
And it was a long wait, of course. And,
Yes.
and you know how it is in doctor's offices. There's nothing now. I mean, it's television, obviously, to entertain you. So the whole thing is about the Democratic Party primary after Oregon, which Sanders won handily,
Yep.
and Kentucky, which Hillary won by just a few points.
But going back to Oregon, he won by double digits there.
Yes.
So just to
And I think it would have just been a little bit of a, campaigning in Kentucky, and Sanders would probably have won it. But, so let's give Hillary a little bit of a credit
for
for
1,800 votes.
That's right.
Okay, 1,800 votes she won.
And so she has obviously probability of numbers that she might be the candidate, but I probably would not bet all my money into that because even though she may have the number, several things can happen. One, it will become a contested convention, and therefore Bernie Sanders delegates, hopefully you'll be one of them, will not give in
No.
on the second ballot.
That's correct.
And there's also a very great possibility that she may not even last into the convention because she might be indicted.
Do you honestly think that's a possibility before July?
Well, again,
Really?
I will not bet my
I
money
know.
on that because I think if I were to bet, it will be the opposite.
I know.
That all these investigations and so on is not going to... I mean, if this were an ordinary person who went to a 7-Eleven and stole maybe a soda, and there's a grand jury, I'm sure that that guy is going to be in jail by
He'll
now.
be already in for the soda, right?
But, you know, this
But-
lady seems to keep on bouncing back out.
You know, when you keep telling people the truth isn't the truth, when you keep saying, you know, they're out to get me, and you say it over and over and over again, people begin to think that there's some validity to that. So, but I think that it brings up a good point, and that is one of the reasons why I do not count out Trump actually beating Hillary in November.
Of course, because as we moved on, and if you look at the trend from the the beginning of this whole
Exactly.
process, that Hillary's point and her positive
Favorability.
image has been quite good. And now the positive image and the negative image has now crossed, and the negative image is now going up and up and up. And it's surpassing Trump.
Right.
So, in a sense,
And that's hard to do.
In a sense, there is some, issue there. But I think, if basically, obviously, what can she do about it at this time? Well, yeah, the American people are forgiving people. She can just come clean and say, hey,
That
listen,
won't happen.
I messed up. And this is what truly happened.
Right.
And I have to make a decision, and the decision was made, and so on and so on. Yeah. You don't have to defend or anything like that.
However, the emails are a lot more than just, well, it was just for convenience or something. The fact that, one of the people that actually was able to hack into her email,
Yes.
and I don't know about her cell phone, whether it was both, but he's already been extradited.
Right.
And you do not, this is probably the only case of a hacker being extradited
Who's a foreign
without-
national.
He is a foreign national, but he did not steal money or do that kind of damage, which is where it's usually been when hackers have gone in and in some illegal way was able to transfer money out of people's bank accounts. And you're talking about like millions of dollars of
Well, we're-
fraud being...
We're talking here about the State Department, and we're talking here
About the FBI.
The FBI, but actually the CIA, because that is foreign country. So they can do rendition on anyone
Right.
that they
but
think
what I'm saying
is
is
an enemy of the state.
Right, but what I'm saying is that that is not usually what happens to somebody that's just a hacker.
Yeah.
That's considered a nuisance hacker. However, to have him brought in and now being questioned the way he's being questioned is unusual.
Like most attorneys says, Bonnie, if you question somebody, you already know the answer.
Right.
So in this case, they already know the answer.
Right.
And I think taking him out of, which one is that, Romania or something like
Yeah,
that?
one of those.
To the United States and putting him in prison here basically isolated him from opening up his mouth to the people all over the world. And he already said that he's got 20,000
Of her
emails
emails.
that he downloaded. And I think having him here is going to just isolate him from whatever leak is going to happen until after the election.
But, I
And then,
mean,
of
my
course-
concern all along with this whole issue has been the fact that when the mainstream media doesn't talk about it, and Fox News is the only one that reports on it.
And I
It
would not
gives-
trust Fox News
exactly,
also.
Exactly, because they have
They
a
have
bias
their own agenda
and they have an
acts to-
agenda.
yeah,
and,
right.
and that makes the whole issue trivialized in the eyes of most Americans.
The thing about the email being transmitted in a non-secured system, primarily, and that in itself is a criminal act, because I'm a small-time federal employee,
Right.
and we have to sign something that says that you have to secure everything that you do.
All
and so
your
on
data,
and so on.
right.
Yeah. And even if I say, well, I'm going to do an email to my wife and ask her for a date tonight, well, I have to put it in the secure data. And unfortunately, she doesn't have a secure
I don't have a secure
receiver, so she will never receive that.
Right.
But I think knowing that, or even unknowingly bypassing that security channel, she broke the law.
Right.
The second thing that I think that is even more important is what was her intention at that time. Because
the intention, wait a minute, the intention has nothing to do with it then, though.
It's
Not by law. Intention is not a consideration.
Well, intention is criminal act, because if she did break the law with the intention of, say, breaking the law, and her intention is so that she can transmit her emails to her, say, assistants who did not have a security clearance at that time, means that she had the intention really of breaking the law. I mean, if she is receiving secured messages,
Right.
and she wants her assistants to share that information, but she cannot because it is in her secured system. So how is she going to bypass that? By having her own email.
Right.
And she can transmit that. And I'm not sure if that was her intent or it is just because she was stupid enough to do it. In any case,
I don't
both,
think, I think that when we think of intent, we kind of begin to think that it was the intent of having foreign agents actually be able to have access to that material. That I never once believed about Hillary Clinton. However, I don't think that, that's really hard for me to believe any...
That is a stupid remark
It
also,
is.
Bonnie, because you say, well, I intend to be able to
Well, but what I'm
get
saying
hacked
is...
so
no,
that all my information...
Ben, what I'm
That's a
saying is that when you
consequence.
talk about what is the intent, the intent for her, she said it straight out, was for her convenience. It was not, that was the intent. So I don't think that that in itself is a criminal act. And I don't believe that the intent, that's why under the law, whatever the intention was, is not part of the law. The law is very clear.
But she went one step over that, Bonnie, because all the secured messages coming from the State Department going to her are in a secured coded thing.
Right.
Now, she has to do something that can decipher all those codes so that she can transmit it into her assistant or whomever she wants
Right.
to share. So she has her IT guy come to her apartment or home and made a server for her. And that server basically is where she picks up all the emails from everywhere.
But that in
And then
itself...
she can make a choice of which one she wants to share.
Right. But Ben, that in itself is also against the law.
Well, according to her, that is her definition of convenience.
I know, but let me just explain that part. To have the server and your own little personal server that is storing government documents, and those emails are government documents, that is against the law. That's very similar to, actually it's worse than what Petraeus did, because Petraeus had the files in his desk drawer in his office, and again, that one drawer is locked, but it's not, and his home was guarded. So it did have some security around it. That server obviously was not secured. It had as much security as what was the name of that website where they would have women they would make the dates online for the...
Craigslist.
Was
oh,
it-
no, that's not.
No, it was
Yeah.
somebody's list,
Right.
but the men could
Yeah.
go online and make
Right.
the dates, and it
Right.
was just for married men who wanted to be discreet. I mean, that server, it had the same kind of security that server had. So to put real government documents with information about operatives, both our operatives and other government operatives that are working with us, it put so many people in jeopardy. So that, to me, is that's the real issue of these emails. It's not, I don't care who, that
Well,
she wrote to her husband or she
yes.
was corresponding to her daughter or whatever. It's the fact that she kept government records in a non-secure facility, never turned them over when she left office. That's all of that is illegal.
Well, there are 4 branches of investigations going on against her, and the email, of course, is one. Which, by the way, just by bringing in any, secret information or any government information out of that secured place, building, whatever, is in
Right.
itself a criminal act.
Right.
So if I go to the VA and pick out all the names of patients and so on and bring it out, that
Send
in
them
itself
over to
is-
me. Yeah.
That
right.
in itself is a criminal act.
Right.
And if I were to do that, I would say that in about 3 days I would probably be indicted, grand juried, and probably already prosecuted.
I'd be missing you this weekend, wouldn't
Uh,
I?
But, oh no, not Hillary, because this investigation has been going on for the last 6 months.
Longer than that.
Or more than that.
Right, it's almost 3 years.
And there's duplications of processes. So the State Department did their own investigation. Then the FBI did their own investigation. And of course, probably the CIA did their own investigation because, listen, the CIA is involved in the big Nazi thing. So, and then every result of these investigations are brought to the Department of Justice. And not only that, but there was, of course, a grand jury. And all of these were brought into the Justice Department. And guess what? Well, it looks like our Attorney General doesn't see any wrongdoing at this time. So,
Well, we don't know that. we don't know that. I mean,
Wow.
at this point, we really don't know that. So, but all of that is only one small problem, because certainly Trump will play up on all of that,
Sure.
along with a number of other.
I'm sure, and I'm sure that the main media is now realizing, boy, this is really a gold mine for them to
Oh, yeah.
dig. And all the night show comedians are probably looking at this as
As a joke, and this is all their material for the next
for the next
year.
8 years.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, to me, is the problem with the mainstream media. It is like, for them, it's money. It's not looking at how you really vet a person to be president of the United States. When you look at somebody's, how are they going to deal as president of the United States, I would think that it is issues of national security. How much do you really value the lives of the Americans that you put into situations of extreme danger?
Well, Bonnie, I think you're so idealistic, and in a certain time, that probably was what we were taught.
You mean when we were a real democracy
and at that
not a
time,
plutocracy?
Yes, there might be some truth to that, but you see, we are basically moving towards the third world. A democratic election, and I'm going to give you an example of that, and that is what happened to the Philippines just
Our
a couple
number,
of weeks
by
ago.
the way, is 889-1728 if you want to call and join the conversation.
So I'm very familiar with the election in the Philippines when
Oh,
they
my God.
just elected this ex-mayor in the southern part, and his name is Mr. Duterte. and the guy can barely speak. But again, every time that he speaks, something really dirty or irrational comes out of his mouth.
It's absolutely disgusting.
And the only reason why he was elected is because he promised to the Filipino people that he is going to execute every criminal, maybe something like 5 a day, something like that. And everybody's giving him.
Yay!
Yes, exactly. Now, he had 2 opponents, and one is a Wharton Business School graduate, very, very good in economy, and that guy did not even really surface. And the other person was, I think, a graduate also, but had lived in the United States for, I think, 12 years or something like that. So, in any case,
didn't he have hit squads that already went out?
Yeah, oh yes. This ex-mayor had a hit squad and so on. I mean, every form of
the most
stupidity
disgusting act.
Evil act, and yet this, and you'd remember, you'd kind of imagine, well, how could people elect people like Hitler or Mussolini or something like that?
Or this guy.
Let me because just it happened.
Before you say how,
we're really descending towards that. And so here comes a man that says, "Oh, we're going to build a wall, and let them pay for that wall, or we're going to ban all these travels and everything." And people look at this and say, he's
what a great
making
idea!
Sense, you know. And here I am, I'm not doing any work and so on, and say. So welcome to the third world.
But what I was going to say before you talked about how can they elect him, I think that for the audience that has never heard this man speak, the most outrageous thing I have heard him say was, you may remember, this was several years ago, maybe 10 years ago, when there were a lot of Americans being kidnapped on those southern islands, and one of the women had been raped by the kidnappers, and he was outraged because he felt that.
Oh, you get this mixed up, Manny.
Okay.
You're talking about this Australian missionary
that was kidnapped and
no, she
raped.
was not kidnapped. She volunteered to, of all places, to work in that high security prison in Cotabato, which is a southern island, and I don't understand why there are, some people like that who would, well, you just don't understand. In any case, there was an outbreak in that prison, and the prisoners got loose and literally raped this missionary and killed her. I know. Anyway, that's.
But his statement was that what a waste. The mayor should have had first dibs.
Yeah.
I mean, that is so outrageous that when I heard him, I mean, I wanted to be sick.
Yeah.
It was so outrageous.
Well, anyway.
Our next outrageous.
That's a third world politics, which we basically are going towards. Level of
respect for women and
sophistication.
I think that one of the things I wanted to discuss just a little bit, I've been thinking a lot about how would I react if all of these, the manipulation of our elections, and we have had a lot of manipulation of the election, whether you want to consider them fraud or voter suppression or whatever. It has cropped up in a number of states. I thought Connecticut was obviously above that, but before we get into Connecticut, I want to just go over what happened in Nevada, because there's been a lot of misreporting on what actually happened in Nevada. Yes, it was pretty awful. You had a lot of screaming. They shut down the convention and had all of the delegates leave. You had the stage surrounded by the stormtroopers protecting what they thought they had to do was, protect people from getting up near the speaker. It's not the first time that Nevada has done these types of things. Prior to their state convention, there was another convention that was held for the county several weeks ago, electing the delegates that would be going. And again, the person that was in charge of the delegates at the last minute was pulled out, and she was fired. And obviously a person that would help with the credentialing, because there were so many fewer Hillary delegates that came to that convention, that the Bernie delegates that did come were obviously outnumbered the Hillary delegates. So they were concerned about that. They pulled out the person that was credentialing these delegates and put in another person. Now, basically, the same thing began to happen at the state convention in Nevada. But that was like the last issue. The first issue was the night before. You had the state Central Committee decide on all new rules. They decided that rather than have the counting of votes by the raise of a hand or by a ballot, but it's generally just counting the raise of the hand, they would simply do simple voice votes. Second, they changed the rules to allow Roberta Lang, who was the chairman, to decide the outcome of that voice vote. So 2 days before, they had a petition. She said, if you don't like it, you have to petition and then be heard, and then we will vote on those rules. So that's what they did. They went out. They were trying to get the petitions the night before. The lines were extremely long. They were about 4 hours long for everyone to get their credentials. So they were trying to get through these lines, get people to understand what this petition was for. They did finally get them. I mean, there was a debate that morning around 9:30 saying, because not everyone had their petitions in, not everyone who wanted to sign the petitions had signed them because they couldn't get to them.
Well, I thought that you were going to say that now they have to have another petition
to hear these
to
petitions.
hear the first petition.
No, they accepted the petition and then wouldn't hear it. So even after they were told that in order to change the rule that they had decided on 2 nights before, when they quickly changed it, that they would have to petition, which they did. And then once the petitions were turned in, that's when they decided that, thanks for turning the petitions in, we're not going to listen to it. And they totally ignored the petition. They went on then to vote on the delegates being seated. They had refused 64 of Bernie Sanders' delegates. 58 of them were so determined to be heard. They all had their credentials there. They all had the proof, but they were not going to hear them. They simply said, we've made a ruling and that's the ruling. So when the vote came to accept the credentialing, obviously Bernie Sanders' group, knowing that they had 58 people standing right outside the convention hall, all of whom had their credentials but were not being allowed in, they took the voice vote, and you could not tell when you listen to the tape. You can't really tell. So they wanted a vote by the raise of the hand to have a count, and then they just said no. The chairman, Roberta, it's under Roberta's rules, so she makes the decision. That's the end of it, and then she walked off stage. Now, I started thinking about this, Ben, and as much of a supporter as I am of Bernie, if that had happened to Hillary's delegates, I would have been, part of why I am a supporter of Bernie is because I can see where our democracy is going.
Well, my opinion is this. I know that you said beginning to say something, but I have to interrupt you a little bit. You got to understand that politics in this country is run by this small party,
Elite group,
and so on and so on. And they are given the task to deliver of whatever the National Committee wants. And in order for this small boys to become big boys, to become bigger boys, to become chairman of the state, they get to deliver. And how are they going to deliver? If they cannot deliver, well, they cheat. How do they cheat? They'll make the rules that will basically, during the convention, become the rule of the convention. And this has been going on for years and years and years. This is not something that did not just happen today. The only reason why it got streamlined is because at those times, the outcome is already clear.
Predetermined, yeah. It's
So
very
there
clear.
is no contest.
Right.
Now there is a contest. And so there is an opposing group that is saying that, hey, listen, we are opposed to these rules and we're opposed to these new rules that they're asking us to jump over and hoop over, and we're doing it, and yet in spite of that, we're ruled that none of these matters because the big boys are already made the decision to deliver, the same thing as in Connecticut.
Well, don't
Wait
get
a
to
minute.
Connecticut first.
Wait a minute. Let me finish.
Okay.
So, now, if Bernie Sanders supporters are being traumatized because of this, I think it only would be the right thing for Bernie Sanders to do would be to come out and defend his foot soldiers.
Let me read you what he
So-
did do, because that's exactly what he did.
All right.
This is Bernie Sanders' statement on Nevada. It is imperative that the Democratic leadership, both nationally and in the states, understand that the political world is changing and that millions of Americans are outraged at establishment politics and establishment economics. The people of this country want a government that represents all of us, not just 1% super PACs and wealthy campaign contributors. The Democratic Party has a choice. It can open its doors and welcome into the party people who are prepared to fight for real economic and social change, people who are willing to take on Wall Street, corporate greed, the fossil fuel industry, which is destroying this planet. Or the party can choose to maintain its status quo, remain dependent on big money campaign contributions, and be a party with limited participation and limited energy. Within the last few days, there have been a number of criticisms made against my campaign organization. Party leaders in Nevada, for example, claimed that the Sanders campaign had a perchance for violence. This is nonsense. Our campaign has held giant rallies all across this country, including in high crime areas, and there have been 0 reports of violence. Our campaign, of course, believes in nonviolent change, and it goes without saying that I condemn any and all forms of violence, including the personal harassment of individuals. But when we speak of violence, I should add here that months ago, during the Nevada campaign, shots were fired into my campaign office in Nevada and the apartment housing complex my campaign staff lived in was broken into and ransacked. If the Democratic Party is to be successful in November, it is imperative that all state parties treat our campaign supporters with fairness and the respect that they have earned. I'm happy to say that has been the case in state conventions in Maine, Alaska, Colorado, and Hawaii, where good decisions were held and democratic decisions were reached. Unfortunately, that was not the case at the Nevada convention. At that convention, the Democratic leadership used its power to prevent a fair and transparent process from taking place, among other things. The chairman of the convention announced that the convention rules passed on voice vote when the vote was a clear no vote. At the very least, the chair should have allowed for a head count. The chair allowed its credentials committee to en masse rule that 64 delegates were ineligible, without offering an opportunity for 58 of them to be heard. That decision enabled the Clinton campaign to end up with a 30-vote majority. The chair refused to acknowledge any motion made from the floor or allow votes on them. The chair refused to accept any petition for amendments to the rules which were properly submitted. These are on top of failures at the precinct and county conventions, including trying to depose and then threaten the arrest of the clerk of the Clark County Convention Credentials Chair because she was operating too fairly. I was so happy when I read his statement.
Well, let me tell you what my understanding of that statement is. Like blah, 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 blah. If Donald Trump were asked to make a comment of this,
Oh, God,
he would
Ben.
just come out and say, they are cheaters, they are crooks, and they should all be fired, and especially the leading candidate. Remember at one time, I think, Bonnie, when somebody ran for presidential election, I think that was Michael Dukakis, and they were talking about capital punishment, and so Dukakis was asked, well, what would you
somebody
do
killed your wife.
if your wife was raped and killed? And he said, let me
Come on,
think.
right, come on, Ben. It wasn't
Well,
that bad. He said he still did not believe in capital
you
punishment.
know, capital punishment and so on and so on. And, well, I still don't believe in capital punishment. Well,
And
is
he
this
was
guy,
crucified.
are they made of steel, or are they all robots? Is Sanders robots? I mean, is he a robot? He should have been coming out there, fiery brimstones, and saying,
Ben, that's not him. That he did it. He did say that. And when you point out, and you can point it out in a rational, you're too
Yeah.
used to me. You know, that's the problem. You're just way too used to me. I wanted, wait, hold on. Because you wanted fire and brimstone, let me give it to you. Because even in Connecticut, 2 days after the 2nd Congressional District votes for Bernie Sanders, we won. Bernie Sanders won in the 2nd Congressional District
yeah,
by double digits in Norwich.
yes,
2 days later, the Democratic Town Committee,
yes.
without any discussion, first order of business, we have to endorse our presidential candidate, all in favor of Hillary Clinton. Everybody's hand goes up, all in favor of Bernie
My
Sanders.
hand almost went up, by the way.
You did not. Obviously, we had a few hands of people that have worked very hard on the Bernie Sanders campaign. Our hands went up. And I was appalled. And I tried to speak and say, I cannot believe that there was no discussion. There wasn't a single discussion 2 days after the Norwich, never mind the 2nd Congressional District, Norwich, double digits, put Bernie Sanders as who we want to endorse, and the Democratic Town Committee decides, we don't have to count any of their votes. Our votes are the only ones that count. The chairman doesn't have to let this be discussed. Sorry, Larry, but I'm really still pissed at that. You know, he doesn't have to have any discussion. I think that was appalling. Now, wait a minute. Let's go one step further, because now we have all of the delegates for the 2nd Congressional District that are going to be elected in caucus on May 31st. We will have, for Bernie Sanders, there will be 2 men and 2 women elected of those that have applied. There will be, I believe, 2 men and 1 woman elected for Hillary Clinton at a separate caucus that same day, that same evening. Now, we went to one meeting by a group that had tried very hard. A lot of the people at that meeting have worked very hard for Bernie Sanders on trying to coordinate all the different districts in the state. When we sat down, the first thing out of the mouth of Leo, who is a union person, out of his mouth comes, well, we all have to, just face reality. Bernie Sanders is done, he's lost, and we have to start thinking about unity. And I turned and I said, well, Bernie supporters are very unified. Of course, I was ignored. And then he goes on to try to dissuade one other woman who has been working for Bernie from the beginning, feeling that she probably can't, maybe afford the trip down there. So he wants to say, you better be prepared to spend at least $2,000. This is not cheap. Nobody pays your way. And besides, we don't want any rebel rousers and troublemakers down there. And poor Deborah says, how do they know if you're a troublemaker? Mm-hmm. And he quickly says, they're reading your emails in your Facebook page, not your emails, your Facebook posts. And all of a sudden, we don't see very many posts from this one supporter anymore, but I'm still putting the same posts that I have all along on there. But what he was doing, it didn't stop here, because what they want are people that will follow the party line. He does not want Governor Malloy embarrassed, because Governor Malloy has been appointed as chairman of the platform committee. He doesn't want the state Central Committee embarrassed by having Democrats not unified behind the party, obviously to him, the party nominee. And I simply asked the question, well, what if there is a second vote? Are you suggesting that I change my vote? Mm-hmm. And he said, there's not going to be a second vote. Oh, okay, as long as they all know that. When I got home, we got home that night. The very next morning, very quickly, first thing in the morning, I get a call from another Bernie supporter that lives on the shoreline, who had signed up to be a delegate. And he had been called 10 o'clock at night. He got calls from the union guy in New York, the union guy in D.C., from a local union guy, from Marty Dunleavy up in Hartford, all of whom telling him that, we can guarantee you that you can be an alternate. We'll guarantee you that. We just don't want you to run as a delegate. We have our own delegate that we want to have run. He's a dealer in one of the casinos, because we have to start thinking about unity. So, what they're doing.
What they're doing is basically saying that, well, you have to go there with an open mind. Well, unfortunately, an open mind is easily swayed to what they want.
What they want.
What they said that what they're saying is that what they don't want is a delegate who stand steadfast
behind Bernie.
Behind Bernie, no matter what.
So that second vote, they want quickly to switch over to Hillary. Mm-hmm. That is not a contested convention, folks, because one of the problems, if the Democratic Party is concerned about winning that election in November, we have three groups right now that, in all probability, will not be voting for Hillary in November. And again, whether or not they vote for Trump is...
Well, these delegates, when they go there and they already know who they're going to vote for, they have to be very strong in character and their integrity, because there's going to be a lot of so-called influence.
And pressure.
And pressure.
It's straight out pressure.
To tell them that, hey, listen, if you change your vote or the coming second vote, this is probably what is going to happen, and you're probably going to be elected or whatever it is to become this and that.
They all want to make sure that they can...
But, like I said, the big boys are already made that promise that they will deliver.
Deliver the votes.
And they're going to have to do everything they can trying to persuade a delegate whom they immediately can sense that, well, this delegate is weak and therefore it can be...
And you have a lot of very new delegates going into the system for the first time.
There's going to be some persuasion, some influencing and so on. I'd like to be one of those persons that they will like to influence.
Because the way it's persuaded, how do you feel when the governor of the state comes up to you and knows you by name. They're not even introduced, just walks right up to you and says, Ben, I'm so glad you're a delegate.
Yeah.
You know, I understand you do this, this, and this. You know, and you're talking to the governor of your state, or you're talking to the senator who is going to recognize you right away, or one of the other senators that Elizabeth, anybody.
It's a dirty politics.
But it is also very difficult not to be impressed, not to feel that,
for the
you know,
simple
they have
reason that people are courteous. All of them are
very sweet.
very reciprocal in their, and they're honest. You know, these delegates, they go there because they are thinking that they have a responsibility to do, and that is to vote for the person that they basically are given the task to vote.
Right.
However, they can be easily persuaded by the experienced
Because they're going to
politicians.
tell them that, look, we need to have party unity.
And
now
you have
is
to be
the
an
time.
open mind.
Right.
And if you do not have an open mind, then you should not be a delegate.
You shouldn't have come in. The problem is that, for me, this isn't just an election. I mean, we have watched the. I don't think we did ever get the video on live here, but the video of how votes are changed on voting machines is on our Facebook page and on YouTube. If you go to Norwich Confidential on Facebook, you can find that video that shows you how the registrar of voters in testing the machines, which I understand our Secretary of State has also announced that she is testing randomly a number of our voting machines in the state of Connecticut. And it was really frightening when you see 8 people put their ballot in the machine, because the machine was brand new. They took the brand new memory stick, they put that in there, and they turn on the machine, and it immediately prints out. There are 0 votes for A, there's 0 votes for B. Then you watch these 8 ballots go in, and you know, you've seen all the ballots. 6 of them are yeses, 2 of them are nos, and what comes out is 7 of them are yeses and 1 is a no. So you're looking at how the vote can be manipulated, and they took it out and said, well, maybe it was just a miscount on here, on this particular machine. Let's put it on this one other screen, and they get the same results. So that shook up a lot of registrars.
Well, like I said, Bunny, welcome to the third world, because what you're describing to me is a stage 1 of becoming a third world country. So there are, I think, 3 or 4 stages
Left.
in the third world. So let me just describe to you what they are, and because this is happening in the Philippines. The first stage is everybody cheats in their balloting. So whether it be ballot machines, ballot counting, and also whether the 2 parties are doing the cheating. Well, we are doing that already. Second stage is basically vote buying. Well, we haven't been there yet, but what they do is they buy your vote. Third stage is the intimidation. Well, we are there, you know, intimidation.
We're only at the intimidation stage
And
at the delegate levels.
The fourth stage, of course, is that you just kill your opponent, and that was that's the end of
God.
it. So that may come, you know, we don't know. But this is the reason why this candidate in the Philippines won, because they're afraid of him, because he is saying that they're going to kill them.
Yeah.
And that happened, by the way, in so many ways in third world countries.
But I think that when you look at that, and you see in a number of states where these things have happened, you see what just happened in Nevada. I have the article that was just printed out, that the reporter, John Ralston, was the one that spread the lies about the chairs being thrown and the death threats being sounded. He wasn't even there. He had, it was a total lie that he printed. He tweeted all of that. I mean, when you, and it was deliberate to slander the Bernie delegates. Now, one of the things that, and like I said, I began to question, what would I do if I were a supporter of Hillary? And to me, one of the only reasons that I support Bernie so strongly is that we know we've never seen it this up close and personal. We knew going into it that the system is rigged. I really thought the system was rigged because both the Democrat and Republicans decide who the candidates are going to be. They're pretty much, the primaries are pretty much coronations. And then all the voters are left to decide between two candidates that the elite have decided, doesn't matter which one wins, I'm going to win. And that's to me was the rigged system. What we're watching happening today is beyond that. And so knowing that and knowing it's our democracy and our republic.
It is an attack on democracy. It's almost like, you mount some kind of a attack.
And it's frightening then.
And democracy basically is like, really fortified fort, and now
that's why I don't understand
it's being
where are
broken piece by piece.
But we cannot be the only ones that are seeing this. I don't believe that. There have to be people that are strong Hillary supporters that are saying, wait a minute, this is not fair. This is not democratic. There is something very wrong with this. Even on our local town committee, to have me be the only one that stands up and says, couldn't a single rule, Robert's Rules of Order, apply when 2 days after a primary that people couldn't have been heard? And then to extend that to the fact that we're now looking at getting 4 Bernie delegates from the 2nd Congressional District, while we have people manipulating who those delegates will be to be down representing the people who voted for Bernie here. If I honestly, if this were all reversed, and for whatever reason Bernie's whole persona was completely different and it was Hillary that was being targeted like this, honestly, I would say that this is an example of how corrupt the system is, and it is not fair to have people that are supporting Hillary and not supporting democracy is a question that baffles me. We have a few minutes. If there's a Hillary supporter out there that can explain to me how you can stand by and watch this and not stand up for democracy. I'm not talking about standing up for Bernie. I'm talking about standing up for democracy. So,
well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
It is very frustrating when.
Well, the issues, of course, are at this time not relevant to our discussion, because our discussion is based on how our democracy system is being attacked, and also how people seem to be disregarding what the freedom and system should be. And okay, so you get the
Doesn't
right
it break
to
your
vote.
heart? For a veteran who was willing to give his life to protect the democracy that we all say we want, how does that make you feel?
Well, we protect everybody.
Yes, but to watch the democracy dissolve like this, Ben, how does that make you feel?
Welcome to the third world.
No, I wish you would be serious about that. It's got to be heartbreaking.
The generals are going to be in charge pretty soon.
Yeah, that was probably one of the things that will happen. But it's not, I think that people are generally well-meaning. They fight really hard for what they think is the right thing. And maybe that's the difference. Maybe I don't think that it is a party, per se, that is saying that we're the party of the people. I don't believe that that is as important as the real foundation of our democracy. I think when the party fails you, there is a problem. And you have a lot of Democrats right now that are not just working to elect a candidate, they're working to save the Democratic Party. I think we have all seen what's happened to the Republican Party, and it will very soon dissolve. When people recognize that you are corrupt, you are rigged, you do not give the voice of the people a real, legitimate voice, you end up with a party that's failed you and a government that fails you. And I think that when you can't take those principles and hold them above everything, and that's what the party should be doing, I think that that's when you begin to fail.
Well, that's it, folks, and good night. We will have another discussion on democracy next week.
No, actually, we're
Yes.
closed next week.
Is that right?
Yes.
Again?
Ellen told me, again, we are closed next week because I forgot the reason this time. We've picked the wrong day, unless you like having Wednesdays off as well. But
No.
we will be back in 2 weeks with a live show. I hope our guest might be available then. If not, I'm looking at several others. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Are we, how are we doing? Are we off the air or not?